All right, so you sent over a ton of stuff about SharePoint Online and Power Apps, blog post by Bert Blevins,
Yeah.
the tech guy, and a whole bunch of his YouTube videos. And it seems like you're really interested in how these tools can, like, totally change how businesses operate. So
Yeah.
let's dive in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that you picked this specific combination. I mean, a lot of people see SharePoint and Power Apps as like separate things, but when you combine SharePoint's data management capabilities with the customization that Power Apps offers, you can create some really, really powerful solutions for pretty much any business need.
Okay, so I'm getting like this custom-built robot army kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But before we, take over the world or anything, maybe we should back up for a second and make sure everyone understands what we're talking about. So what is SharePoint Online? I mean, some people might just think it's food,
Heck yeah.
You had a fancy file storage system.
Oh, it's way more than just file storage. Think of SharePoint Online as like the central nervous system of a modern collaborative workplace. It's the place where you can create, manage, share all kinds of content, documents, the intranet sites, even company-wide announcements. And it's all within this secure cloud-based environment.
So it's not just about storing files. It's about, I guess, giving those files context.
Yeah.
And making sure that the right people have access to them at the right time. From what I'm seeing in Bert's blog post, it seems like SharePoint is really the foundation that you use to build these awesome Power Apps solutions on.
Exactly. Think of it this way. SharePoint Online is your secure data warehouse, and Power Apps is the toolkit that lets you build custom tools to access and use that data. And the best part is, you don't need to be a coding expert to create these apps. Power Apps has this visual interface, you drag and drop elements, there are pre-built connectors, so it makes app development accessible to pretty much everyone.
And that's where things get really interesting to me. We're talking about giving people who really understand their business processes the power to build their own solutions without having to rely on a whole team of developers. That's a huge change.
Absolutely. It allows businesses to be so much more agile and responsive to changing needs. Instead of waiting months for IT to develop a custom solution, someone who works in the business could potentially create a basic app in just a few hours.
Okay, I'm starting to see how well these tools can work together, but let's get specific. Can you give us some real-world examples of how businesses are using this combination to their advantage?
Sure. Bert's blog post highlighted a few really interesting scenarios. One that really stood out to me was this company that completely redesigned their employee onboarding process using SharePoint and Power Apps. So instead of having new hires deal with mountains of paperwork and all that confusion, they now go through everything using this personalized app that guides them through each step. Company policies, benefits enrollment, it's all right there. Accessible and super easy to understand.
So right away, they're making a good first impression and setting the stage for a positive employee experience. I like that.
Right. And think about all the time saved on the administrative side of things. No more chasing down signatures or manually entering data. The app can just pull all the necessary information directly from SharePoint, which ensures accuracy and consistency across the board.
It's like taking a process that used to be a huge pain for everyone and turning it into something that people might actually enjoy.
That's exactly what we're aiming for, using technology to make work more efficient and, maybe even a little bit enjoyable. There's also another example from the blog. It's about a manufacturing company that built a custom Power App to manage their inventory. This app connects directly to their SharePoint document libraries, and it allows them to track stock levels in real time, automate purchase orders, and even predict future demand.
Wait, predict future demand? How is that even possible? Sounds like magic.
No magic involved, just some very clever use of data and algorithms. By analyzing historical data and integrating with external sources, the app can identify trends and make some really accurate predictions about what their inventory needs will be in the future. This helps them optimize their stock levels, avoid any shortages, and ultimately save money.
Okay. Now I see how this goes way beyond just automating simple tasks. We're talking about building systems that can actually learn and help businesses make smarter decisions.
Exactly. And that's where the real power of this combination lies. It's not just about doing things faster. It's about doing them smarter.
I'm already thinking about all the processes in my own work that could be improved with these tools. It's like a whole new world of possibilities that just opened up. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I'm curious about the security aspects of all this. You're bringing in so much data, building custom apps. How do you make sure everything stays protected?
That's where those YouTube videos you sent over come in. Bert goes into a lot of detail about cybersecurity best practices. And he specifically talks about how to secure both SharePoint and Power Apps environments.
So it sounds like he's not just a tech enthusiast. He's also really focused on security.
Oh, absolutely. He really emphasizes how important it is to have strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, and something called privileged access management, which basically makes sure that only authorized users have access to sensitive information.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want just anyone having access to all this powerful technology.
Right. He also talks about regularly reviewing user permissions, implementing measures to prevent data loss, and staying up to date on the latest security threats.
So you can't just set it up and forget about it. You have to be proactive about security.
Exactly. Especially when you're dealing with sensitive business data, security is an ongoing process, not a one-time event.
Okay, so we've got SharePoint as our foundation, Power Apps to build custom tools, and Bert Blevins as our security expert. I'm seeing a lot of focus on customizing those SharePoint lists and libraries. What makes them so important?
You've hit a really important point there. Lists and libraries are basically the building blocks of SharePoint. They're like supercharged spreadsheets and folders, but with, way more capabilities.
Supercharged. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these supercharged elements.
Okay, so lists are incredibly versatile. You can use them to keep track of all kinds of structured data, project tasks, customer contacts, inventory, you name it. And libraries, as you might guess, store all your documents and files. But the real magic happens when you start customizing them.
So you're not just dumping data into these things. You're actually shaping them to work the way you need them to.
Yeah.
What kinds of customization are we talking about?
Well, let's start with managed metadata. It might sound a bit technical, but it's really powerful. Imagine you have a big organization with everyone creating their own tags and categories for documents. It would quickly become super chaotic. But managed metadata helps prevent that chaos. It creates a controlled vocabulary that everyone in the company uses. It's like having a shared dictionary for everyone to use when they tag content, which makes it way easier to search and find information.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about organizing information for yourself. It's about making sure that everyone in the company can easily find what they need and understand it. Like you said, it's about speaking a common language.
Exactly. And that's so important for knowledge sharing and collaboration. Then you have content types, which are basically templates for different kinds of documents. Let's say you have a content type for contracts with specific fields like contract number and the effective date. When someone creates a new contract, they automatically get those fields, which helps ensure consistency and compliance.
So no more searching for the right template or worrying about missing important information. That's a lifesaver for anyone who deals with a ton of documents.
Absolutely. And don't forget about versioning, which keeps track of every change made to a document, so you don't have to worry about accidentally overwriting someone's work or losing track of edits. You can see who made what changes and when, and even go back to older versions if you need to.
It's like having a safety net for your documents. But let's be real. Sometimes document management can feel kind of rigid and inflexible. How does Power Apps make things better?
That's where things get really interesting. Power Apps lets you create custom forms and interfaces that connect to your SharePoint data. Remember those clunky standard SharePoint forms? With Power Apps, you can create really sleek, user-friendly experiences. You can add conditional formatting, so important information stands out, build dynamic fields that change based on what the user enters, and even integrate forms with workflows to automate certain tasks.
Okay, so instead of just filling out a boring static form, it's like an interactive experience. I can picture forms that practically fill themselves out based on your previous choices.
Exactly, and that's just the beginning. Remember that employee onboarding app we were talking about? Imagine a new hire is filling out a form, and as they choose their department and role, the form automatically updates to show only the information and fields that are relevant to their specific situation.
Now I see how all these pieces fit together. SharePoint provides that solid back-end data management, and Power Apps lets you create these custom, user-friendly interfaces. It's like the perfect tech power couple.
I like that. They definitely complement each other really well, but it's important to keep in mind that with all this power comes great responsibility, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
You're right. We can't forget about security. You mentioned that Bert emphasizes strong passwords and multi-factor authentication, but are there any specific security considerations for SharePoint and Power Apps?
Absolutely. Bert's videos go deep into how to secure these environments. One key concept he talks about is just-in-time permissions. It's a way of giving people temporary access to resources only when they need it. So instead of giving someone permanent access to sensitive data, They only get access for a specific task or a limited time.
So it's like giving someone a key to one specific room
Yeah,
instead of handing them the master key to the whole building.
exactly. And that significantly reduces the risk of anyone getting unauthorized access. He also talks about cloud identity discovery, which is basically knowing who has access to what in your cloud environment.
That sounds super important for security and compliance.
It is. You need to regularly check who has what permissions. Look for any accounts that shouldn't have access.
Right.
And just make sure that everyone can only access what they need to do their job.
Okay, so we've talked about security, but I'm wondering about something else. We've covered how Power Apps lets you build custom interfaces for SharePoint. Can you also use it to automate tasks and workflows?
Well, Power Apps is great for user-facing apps. But if you want to automate workflows, we need to talk about another part of Microsoft Power Platform, Power Automate.
Power Automate, is that like the conductor of this digital orchestra? Bringing everything together?
I like that analogy.
So we're talking about automating all those repetitive tasks that take up so much time. Copying data between systems, sending notifications, approving documents.
Exactly. And the best part is, you don't have to write any code to create these workflows. Power Automate has a visual interface. You just drag and drop elements to build the workflow you need. It's real powerful and surprisingly user-friendly.
Okay, so Power Automate is the workflow wizard, but I'm still not entirely clear on how it works with SharePoint. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you have a SharePoint library where your team keeps all their project documents.
Yeah.
Every time someone uploads a new document, you want to automatically create a task in Microsoft Teams. This task would notify the team and assign someone to review the document. With Power Automate, you can set up a flow to do just that.
So instead of someone having to create that task manually and then notify everyone, it all happens automatically behind the scenes. No more missed deadlines or forgotten documents.
Exactly. And that frees up your team to focus on more important things. That was just one example. But you can use Power Automate to automate tons of tasks that involve SharePoint.
My mind is officially blown. SharePoint, Power Apps, Power Automate. It's a whole ecosystem of tools designed to change how we work.
I know. It's a lot to take in.
Maybe we should take a break and then come back to look at some specific examples of how these tools are being used out in the real world. All right, back and ready to jump back into this world of, digital transformation. We've talked about SharePoint as our data hub, Power Apps for custom apps, and now Power Automate to tie it all together. It's really starting to make sense to me now, but I'm still curious to hear more about how these tools are actually being used out in the real world.
Well, that's what makes this whole ecosystem so great. It's incredibly versatile. We've already talked about employee onboarding and inventory management, but how about we look at how Power Automate can make something that everyone hates a little bit less painful? Expense reports.
Oh, man. If you could find a way to make expense reports less of a hassle, you'd be a hero.
No heroics here.
Yeah.
Just some good old automation. Imagine this. You've got a sales rep, and they upload all their receipts to a specific SharePoint library.
Oh.
Power Automate sees those new receipts and it automatically grabs the important information, pre-fills an expense report form, and sends it off to their manager for approval.
Wow. All without having to send a single email or type anything in manually.
Exactly.
That sounds amazing. No more trying to read faded receipts
Yeah.
or tracking down missing ones. What about the managers who have to approve those reports? Are they stuck at their desks all day?
Not at all. With Power Automate, managers can get notifications and review expense reports right from their phones.
Well, that's handy.
They can approve, reject, or request more information, all with just a few taps. And everything is tracked and logged in SharePoint automatically, so you have a clear audit trail.
So not only are we saving time and reducing errors, but we're also making the whole process more accountable and transparent.
Right. It's a win-win situation. But that's just one example. Think about other processes, like managing contracts, processing vacation requests, or even handling customer support tickets. Power Automate can handle all of that, connecting different systems and applications to create a really streamlined workflow.
I see. So it's not just about automating individual tasks. It's about building these connected systems where everything flows smoothly from one step to the next.
Exactly.
So for someone listening to all of this, what's the main takeaway? Where should they start if they want to explore these tools and maybe implement them in their own company?
Well, first, I'd say pick a process that's especially frustrating or inefficient, something that could really benefit from automation. Then start looking into what SharePoint Online, Power Apps, and Power Automate can do. Microsoft has a ton of resources to help you. Tutorials, documentation, They even have free trial accounts.
So it sounds like it's pretty easy to get started.
Definitely. Don't be afraid to experiment and just try things out.
What else would you recommend for someone who's just beginning their digital transformation journey?
I'd also suggest connecting with other people who are already using these tools. There's a really active online community of SharePoint and Power Platform users who are always happy to share what they know. Attending webinars, joining forums, and reading industry blogs can give you some great insights.
It's incredible to think that just a few years ago, these tools were only available to big companies with huge IT departments.
I know.
But now, with cloud computing and platforms like SharePoint Online and the Power Platform, even small businesses and individuals can take advantage of digital transformation.
It's definitely leveled the playing field.
Well, this deep dive has been amazing. I've learned so much about the power of SharePoint Online, Power Apps, and Power Automate. And I can't wait to see how I can use these tools in my own work.
I'm glad you found it helpful. Remember, start small, experiment, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
To our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some ideas about how you can use these tools to improve your own work. Happy innovating.